This is a SnapEd New York video presentation.
Hello everyone, my name is Wendy Beckman and I'm a registered dietitian with the New York State Office for the Aging and SnapEd New York. Thanks for joining me today on What's Cooking with NYSOFA. Today I'm going to be making butternut squash and apple soup. We will be posting the link to the recipe below, and the recipe can also be found on the SnapEd New York website at www.snapedny.org. Butternut squash and apples are both grown in New York State. Butternut squash is a winter squash. Other varieties of winter squash include Hubbard, buttercup, and spaghetti squash, but butternut and acorn squash are the two most abundantly grown in New York State. Even though this recipe calls for butternut squash, you could probably also use acorn squash as well. This recipe makes 8 servings. Each serving has 94 calories with 3 grams of total fat, only a half a gram of saturated fat, 6 grams of protein, and 2 grams of fiber. This recipe is also low in sodium. Before we get into this recipe, let's look at the My Plate graphic. This recipe covers the fruits and vegetables section of My Plate. Follow the My Plate recommendations and make half of your plate fruits and vegetables at each meal. You also want to vary your veggies so you can make sure that you get all of the different vitamins and minerals that your body needs. Remember that everything that you eat and drink over time matters. You want to find your healthy eating style and maintain it for a lifetime. The right mix can help you be healthier now and in the future. Most Americans don't eat enough fruits and vegetables every day, so you know that I love to share with you ideas on how to add more fruits and vegetables into your eating pattern, and this recipe is a great way to do it. Now, if you're wondering what I'm going to make next month, make sure you watch until the end when I'm going to reveal next month's healthy and delicious recipe. So let's start making this soup. Remember to wash your hands with soap for at least 20 seconds or use an alcohol-based hand sanitizer before you start cooking. Let's look at the ingredients for this recipe. Now, I've cut the recipe in half, so I have enough in front of me for about 4 servings. So just keep that in mind when I'm going over the ingredients. I'm going to tell you what the recipe calls for all 8 servings. First, you're going to need a tablespoon of olive oil. I have an onion that's chopped. You're going to need 2 cloves of garlic that are peeled and minced. You can use jarred garlic if you want to. You need 1 stalk of celery that is chopped. There's 2 teaspoons of curry powder and 1 teaspoon of dried basil. You can use fresh also if you want to, but I had dried basil, so that's what I'm using. And here I have a large butternut squash, peeled, seeded, and cubed, or you can use 1 20-ounce package of pre-cut squash. You could also use frozen, you could use fresh, whatever works for you. The pre-cut and the frozen squash is a great help to anyone who has difficulty using a knife or anyone who just wants to save some time. I have 1 Granny Smith apple over here. It's been peeled and cut up and cubed. The recipe also calls for a tart apple, so the Granny Smith variety is a good option. Last, I have 8 cups of low-sodium chicken or vegetable broth. I am using vegetable broth here, and remember to look for the low-sodium varieties at your grocery store. Now, first, before we get putting all of these things into the pan, let me show you how to cut up this butternut squash. So this part is the top of the butternut squash, and I already cut that up, but this part is the bottom part. So there is a little bit of seeds in the butternut squash, just at the bottom. So you have to get rid of those first before you start cutting it. So we're going to sort of scrape that away. Get rid of all of those seeds in there. It's very similar to any other squash variety that you might use. There are some seeds in it. Butternut squash, though, has very few seeds in it. So that's kind of a nice difference. And then we got the other side of this, and we're going to scoop that out as well. Let's get all of those seeds out of there. Some of the other squashes, and like if you've ever made spaghetti squash, it's a little bit of a chore to get sort of the insides of the spaghetti squash out so that you can cook it. So there's that with the seeds all gone. I'm going to get rid of that part. And then I can show you how to cut this up. So let me use this piece first. Best thing to do is to turn it over so that the flat side is down. And then I'm going to just cut it into some slices here. You can see that there is some resistance on the knife while I am cutting this butternut squash. It is a challenge to get through some of the squashes. They can be a little bit hard to cut up. If you have any mobility issues, you have problems with your hands, you might have some arthritis or carpal tunnel or something like that, it's going to be a little hard to cut this up. If that is the case, then for you, the frozen or the pre-cut squash packages that are at the store might be a good option for you. Let me cut these again. So I have some nice cubes that look just very similar to the cubes that are in this measuring cup here. That's good enough for that. I'm going to set that aside. We're going to do the same thing with this piece. I'm going to get rid of that one, and we can just cut this one up. So again, just some little cubes here, about a half of a cup, or excuse me, about a half an inch wide or so. All right, so that's those all cut up. That looks pretty good. All right, so now that we have all of the squash cut, we can start making this recipe. We're going to use it in this one pot here. First, you need to put your heat on to about medium. My pot has already been heating up for a while. Once the pot is warmed up, you're going to add the oil. So first, I'm going to put the olive oil in. Let's put that in. And then I'm going to add the onion, garlic, celery, curry powder, and basil. So let's get the onion in there first. Let's use the garlic here. That out of the way. Use my spoon, make sure I get all of the garlic. It smells wonderful. I love onions and garlic together. That's always delicious. All right. Celery goes in next. We're going to cook all of these things so that they get a little bit soft before we start adding the other ingredients to the pot. I'm going to add some, make sure that it's coated with the oil. That looks good. Celery, curry powder, and basil. Here's the curry powder. There's the basil. Good. Now we're going to stir all of that up. And here we can see that we're getting the garlic and the onions coated with those herbs. And that is a great way to get the flavor going in this soup. Yep, it smells wonderful. Okay, so once you have that going, you have to leave it in the pot and have it going for about maybe 10 or 12 minutes. And you'll know when your onions are cooked enough because they will become a little bit translucent or a little bit more see-through. And usually that takes a little while. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to keep going with this. The onions and the garlic are actually both part of the allium family, and they are filled with antioxidants that are really great for you. They can help prevent some cancers, some things like heart disease and diabetes. So they're good to include in your diet. Next, we're going to add the squash, the apples, and the broth. So I'm going to put the broth in first. This is about 4 cups of broth. Recipe calls for 8, but this is vegetable stock. Just put that in there. Again, look for the low sodium varieties. Now let's put the squash in that I just cut up. Put that in. There we go. I'm going to dump these in. There we go. And last, we're going to put in this apple, this tart apple. Granny Smith ones are the green ones, and they're pretty reliably tart. There are other varieties that are tart as well, but I always know that if I get a Granny Smith apple, it's going to be tart. So that's a good way to do it. All right. So after you put everything in the pot and you stir it together, you want to bring the mixture to a boil. So you might have to turn the heat up to high, and you might want to put the top on the pot. So after your mixture comes to a boil, you're going to turn the heat down to low and then simmer it for about 45 minutes or until the squash is tender. I found that when I made it, I did not need to cook it for quite that long. About 30 minutes was good. So check it at about the 30-minute mark. You can use a fork and test if the squash is tender or not. Once the squash is tender, you have to turn off the heat, set the mixture off to the side and off of the burner and let it cool to room temperature for about 15 minutes. And after that, you're going to use a slotted spoon to remove the squash and apple from the soup, separate it from the broth, and then you're going to put it in a food processor or a blender. So that's a little bit of a process. I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way because I have a blender behind me and I'm going to bring that over. So let me move these things out of the way first, and then I can get the squash and apples that I cooked earlier and put it in the blender for you. So hold on just a minute. It's the bottom of my blender, the top of my blender, and then I need my 2 bowls here. Okay. So this is the cooked squash and apple, and that is the cooked broth. So those things were on the oven or on the stove top, maybe about 30 minutes or so. So in the recipe, it tells you to make sure that you want to vent your either your food processor or your blender. And there's a reason for that. I have cooled this down quite a bit, so I don't have to worry about that as much. But if your food processor or blender has an opening in it, like mine does, mine has a little top on it where you can just open that to vent it. That's a great help. If you don't have that in your food processor or your blender, you might have to sort of open the top away from you to vent some of the steam. Some of the food processors, many of them have an opening on the top where you can put food in and it has a little stopper that goes into it. When you're blending up the hot squash, you want to remove that stopper, place a dish towel over the opening so that when the food processor is running, you don't get squash all over your kitchen. It's a good tip. So let's transfer the cooked squash and apple into the blender. Let me get my spoon back here. Okay. And I'm going to get my spoon and put some of these cooked vegetables into the blender. When I took these vegetables out, there's actually a little bit of liquid in the bottom of the bowl. And that's because that liquid sort of came out of those vegetables after I transferred them. And that's a normal thing to have happen. And that's good because the liquid's going to help us blend those things together. So first I'm going to do that. And when you're doing this at home, you might have to sort of do this in stages. You don't want to overfill your blender or food processor. Let me put some of the liquid, some of the broth back in. Just a little bit. I'm going to put the top on. Make sure it's nice and tight. All right. You want to start it maybe at a lower speed and then work up. So we'll start lower. And here I'm seeing that I need a little more liquid in there because it's not moving around very much. It looks a little bit too thick. So let's add some more of that in. All right, let's do that again. There we go. That's looking a little better. That's moving around pretty good. All right, great. Let's see if we can add a little bit more in there. If I can get the top off of here. There we go. We're going to put in a few more pieces of the squash and the apple. And the curry smells so good with the addition of the basil and the curry that it really adds some depth of color to the broth. It's delicious. And then we're going to put some more of the broth in there. Okay, and I think we're good with that. We can put this away. Hopefully that's enough liquid in there. Let's try it again. Let's see how that goes. Okay. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. All right, I think that worked out really pretty well. Okay, good. So you want to blend it until there are no more chunks in it and it's nice and smooth, almost like a cream soup. So now let me get a bowl and I'm going to pour some out so you can take a look at what it looks like. So there it is. It looks great and it smells delicious. The curry really gives it a beautiful color. Now, I know you've heard me say before that all forms of fruits and vegetables count. Fresh, frozen, canned, and dried can all be used to get you closer to your goal of making half of your plate fruits and vegetables. In this recipe, you can use fresh squash or you can use frozen, whatever works for you. I hope this recipe gave you some more ideas on how to incorporate more vegetables into your diet. Don't forget to join me next month when I'll share more tips on how to save time, save money, and eat healthy. In January, I'll be making a baked kale frittata. It's a great recipe for breakfast or dinner. I'll be back with another edition of What's Cooking with NYSOFA on Friday, January 31st at 12:30 p.m. right here on the New York State Office for the Aging Facebook page and the New York State Office for the Aging YouTube channel. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get notified every time a new episode airs. This presentation was funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This institution is an equal opportunity provider. Have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We know the healthy choice isn't always the easiest choice, but small changes can make a big difference. Start today by getting involved with SNAP-Ed New York. This program is free for those who qualify or receive SNAP benefits. We want to help you save time, save money, and eat healthy. Learn how SNAP-Ed can make a difference in your life. For more information and to find your local program, visit snapedny.org. This material is funded by USDA's Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. SNAP. This institution is an equal opportunity provider.
Hi, I'm registered dietitian Wendy Beckman, host of What's Cooking with NYSOFA. Over the past 2 years, I've had the opportunity to share healthy, nutritious recipes with you on the show. I work for the New York State Office for the Aging, and thanks to a partnership with SNAP-Ed New York, our nutrition team reaches hundreds of thousands of older New Yorkers each year. So why a cooking program? 60% of health costs and related issues have nothing to do with health, but instead have to do with individual behaviors like our food choices and physical activity. The recipes we feature are nutritionally appropriate for older adults, meeting critical nutrition requirements for healthy aging. What I bet you don't know is that this show is only part of a larger effort. To help me explain what our nutrition team at the New York State Office for the Aging does and what a registered dietitian is, here is registered dietitian Lisbeth Irish.
A registered dietitian is a professional who has training and education in food and nutrition. To become an RD, you must complete certain requirements, including a minimum of a bachelor's degree from an institution that's accredited by the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. You must also pass a national examination and meet continuing education requirements. What does that mean? As RDs, we are qualified to offer accurate advice about nutrition, and we can help answer your questions about how diet can affect your health. At NYSOFA, the registered dietitians handle many tasks. This includes hosting 2 online programs aimed at helping older New Yorkers make better nutrition choices. These programs are What's Cooking with NYSOFA, which is our monthly cooking demonstration, and a Facebook Live program that I host called Ask the Experts, Nutrition Edition. In the months ahead, be on your lookout for it. We'll be sharing your questions and our experts' answers about nutrition and health. New episodes of Ask the Experts Nutrition Edition debut the second Friday of each month on Facebook and YouTube.
As Lisbeth explained, registered dietitians at NYSOFA handle many tasks, including food safety at congregate meal sites, educational materials, and outreach. In the meantime, please don't miss an episode of either show produced by our team, What's Cooking with NYSOFA and Ask the Experts Nutrition Edition. Every episode is uploaded to YouTube, and you'll find the archive shows there.
Do you have a question about foods? Or do you have a particular health issue that you'd like to improve by changing your diet? Tune in to Ask the Experts Nutrition Edition every second Friday at 1 p.m. We'd love to hear from you.
Remember, registered dietitians are the experts in nutrition. Visit for more sound advice about eating healthy on a budget.